What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Oak Tree Football channel, and welcome back to another college football prediction video. Today I'm going to be going over my 2021 to 2022 Big Ten football predictions. I'm going to get right into it, starting off with Indiana. The Hoosiers surprised everybody last season. They ended the season 6-2, 6-1 in conference, which was a big surprise. Michael Penix, the quarterback, is back. He got injured on the later end of last season, but he is back from that injury, and you see I do have him as one of the key players for this team. And then on the left side, you can see that Indiana is my 15th ranked team for this college football season in my preseason top 25. As for some other key players, I got Ty Freifogel there, the star wide receiver. He really was very, very solid last season. I liked what I saw from him, and I think he can have another big year this season. And then Micah McFadden, in my opinion, one of the better linebackers in the Big Ten and potentially in all of college football. As for some other key players, you've also got tight end Peyton Hendershot, who's back with the program, and cornerback Jalen Williams, who had 4 interceptions last season. Key games, it's going to be really interesting. The first game is going to be against Cincinnati, out of conference. Cincinnati, in my opinion, are a top 10 team right now, and it's going to be interesting to see how they do this season. Of course, being a Group of 5 school, and if they can pull off a win against Indiana, that would be huge. But if Indiana wins that one, it's a top 10 win over a top 10 team, so that would be a big win. They also have to play on the road at Penn State. That one's going to be really tough. And then at home against Ohio State, who they almost beat last year, but did end up losing at the end. My overall record prediction for Indiana this season, it's going to be 10-2. I really like this Indiana team. A lot of people are predicting them around the 9-3, 10-2 range, maybe 8-4. I like this team, and I do think they have a tough schedule, but I do like them to win one of those 3 key games and then lose the other 2. Right now, I do think they beat Cincinnati, but then lose to Penn State and Ohio State. Moving on to Maryland. Maryland were an interesting team last season. They were kind of on and off. Their offense was pretty solid for the most part, especially with quarterback Taulia Tagovailoa, the brother of Tua Tagovailoa. He was pretty solid last season. He had a few nice touchdown passes. He's a nice runner as well. And then Dante Demas, the wide receiver, the number 1 receiver this year. I believe he was the number 1 receiver last year as well. I expect big things from him this season in the full schedule, as Maryland only played 5 games last season. They were 2-3, so just about average. They had a very solid recruiting class, number 18 in the country, and they're 10th in the country. You'll look at the key games. Out of conference against West Virginia, and then I also put Michigan State and Rutgers, 2 conference games that I think they could win. My record prediction for Maryland this season is going to be 5-7 with 3 conference wins. I think this Maryland team is solid. I think they're better than a lot of people are giving them credit for, but I can't see them being that great this season. So I could see them sneaking into a bowl game at 6-6, but I'm going to go with a 5-5 record, a 5-7 record right now. Moving on to Michigan. Michigan, extremely disappointing last season. There's always high expectations for Michigan. They're always going to get hyped up in the offseason, and last year they just were not good. They started off the season well, and then they only won 1 game out of their last 5. They're bringing in a good recruiting class like they usually do, losing quite a bit of talent, and they are not currently ranked in my preseason top 25, though I do think they will be solid this season. For key players, you've got Hassan Haskins, the running back, one of the better running backs in the conference in my opinion. Ronnie Bell, the wide receiver, probably the best offensive player this team has. An excellent wide receiver, and he's going to have to make a big impact this year for whoever's playing quarterback at Michigan. I do think it will be Cade McNamara, but there are some other options. They brought in transfer Alan Bowman from Texas Tech, who is a solid quarterback. Maybe he could start, but like I said, I do think it will be Cade McNamara. And then the final key player, the only defensive player, Aiden Hutchinson, one of the top defensive end prospects for the upcoming NFL draft, and one of the better defensive ends in college football. As for the key games, at Wisconsin, at Penn State, and against Ohio State. All games that are going to be really tough, and I do think they lose all those games. But my record prediction for Michigan this season is going to be 7-5, so it will get them to a bowl game. You see the conference record, not great, 4-5 in conference, but I still do think this Michigan team will be good enough to make a bowl game this season. And overall, even though they have some tough key games, I don't think their schedule is all too tough. overall. They do play Washington out of conference, which is a pretty difficult game, but I do think they can win that one and have a pretty successful, maybe not great season, but a pretty successful season in the Big Ten this year. Moving on to Michigan State, their rivals. Now, Michigan State were even worse than Michigan last season. They did beat Michigan, but they also lost more games. They lost 5 games and only won 2. An okay recruiting class. They're bringing back some of their team key players. The first one is going to be transfer quarterback Anthony Russo. Came in from Temple. I think he's a solid quarterback. This Michigan State team, they lack talent on offense. Anthony Russo is going to have to step up in a big way if this Michigan State offense wants to work together well as a unit. The other 2 are going to be defensive players. First up, you got Jacob Panasiuk. I think that's how you pronounce it. Pretty solid defensive end, and I think he can get some good pressures this season. He was solid last year. And then you've also got Noah Harvey, the linebacker. He was pretty solid last season, and I do believe he's one of the better players on this Michigan State defense. I think the defense is pretty okay overall, but the offense really struggles in my opinion. My record prediction for Michigan State is going to be 4-8. Not good enough to make a bowl game. Again, only 2 conference wins. Like I said, I just don't think this offense is good enough to win them that many games this season. And I think maybe 4 is maybe a little bit higher than most people would expect with this offense. I think maybe they could drop one more game in conference and go 3-9. But I'm going to be a little bit optimistic. Not that optimistic, but I'm going to say they're going to go 4-8 this year. Moving on to the Ohio State Buckeyes. Last season was very interesting for Ohio State because it felt kind of disappointing throughout the regular season, but they still made it to the college football, to the final. Obviously, they lost to Alabama there, but they made it really far, and that's surprising because they did not look like the Ohio State we expected earlier in the season. They went 5-0 in conference last season. They almost lost against Indiana, like I mentioned earlier, but they were just about able to hold on in that game. It was an interesting season for the Buckeyes. They didn't play that great in the Big Ten Championship, but they were able to get the win over Northwestern. And then over the regular season, they hadn't been great. They'd been good, but not great. And then they made it to the college football playoff, and they completely dominated against Clemson in the first game. Heading into the season, they're losing a lot of talent, but they're going to be ranked number 4 in my preseason top 25. They had the second best recruiting class in the country behind only Alabama. They're returning production rank. Like I said, they're losing a lot. Only 50% of their team is coming back, which is 121st in the nation, which means they are in the bottom 10 in that category. For some key players, you got C.J. Stroud there, assuming he does start at the quarterback position. This Ohio State team has a ton of options at the quarterback position. Right now, it does look likely that C.J. Stroud does start. But they also have options in Jack Miller, Kyle McCord, and Quinn Ewers, the 5-star recruit who decided to leave high school a year early to come to the program. Other key players, you've got Garrett Wilson, the wide receiver. This Ohio State receiving group is just excellent. I think Garrett Wilson is the best there. But there is so much talent. And whoever plays quarterback, probably C.J. Stroud, they could be potentially in the Heisman Trophy conversation just because of how much talent they have around them. And then the final key player is going to be linebacker Haskell Garrett. Probably the best defensive player on this team, though they also have defensive end Zach Harrison, who I think is really solid. Master Teague also on the offense, not in the key players, but the running back, I think he's going to be good this season. Was a backup last season, but he's going to get more playing time this season, and I do like him. I think he's very talented when he's on the field. Key games, they have to play Oregon in week 2. They play on the road against Indiana, which is going to be tough, and then they play Penn State. Pretty tough key games there. But this Buckeyes team is among the best in the nation right now, and I'm going to go with a 12-0 record for them, and 9-0 in conference. I just can't really see them losing to that many teams this year. Maybe they lose to Indiana on the road. Maybe there's a chance they lose to Penn State or Oregon. But I think more than likely they win both of those home games, and I do think they can edge out Indiana on the road. So this Ohio State team, just so much talent offensively, really good defensively as well. Winning games really should not be too much of a problem for Ohio State this year. If it is, then there's an issue there, but I would not be surprised to see Ohio State in the Big Ten championship and maybe even in the college football playoff when that rolls around. Moving on to Penn State. Last season was very interesting for Penn State. There were high expectations coming into the year, and then they completely flopped. They started their first 5 games with 5 losses. The first 2 losses were against Indiana and Ohio State, 2 very solid teams, but then they lost 3 games that they probably shouldn't have lost, and that's when worries started to arise. But they won all of their final 4 games, and there's a pretty good feeling, I think, to this Penn State team heading into the season. They're ranked number 14 in my preseason top 25. They're definitely going to improve this season after the huge disappointment, which was last year. They had a good recruiting class. They're bringing back 78% of their team. The key players, Jahan Dotson, in my opinion, potentially the best receiver in the Big 12. He was so impressive last year. I didn't really expect him to break out at all, but he was really, really good. And I would love to see more from him again after the great season he had, especially in games against Ohio State earlier in the year. You also have running back Noah Cain. This Penn State offense is going to have a good running game like they usually do. You look at the NFL running backs that have came from Penn State, and you can usually expect Penn State to have a solid running game, and I think Noah Cain is a very solid running back. Also on the offense, which I didn't add in the key players, is Sean Clifford. He's back at quarterback. He's been okay, but he's going to need to step up if this Penn State really wants to be a top 15 team and potentially even a top 10 team in the nation. And then the final key player is going to be Tariq Castro-Fields, the cornerback. Penn State's best cornerback, their best defensive player in my opinion. He's been consistently good, and I expect a good season from him this year. Key games on the road at Wisconsin and Ohio State, and at home against Indiana. All very tough games. My record prediction for Penn State is going to be 9-3 with 6 wins and 3 losses in conference. Very good season for them. Not good enough to win the division, like I said, as Ohio State goes undefeated, but still a very good record nonetheless. Moving on to Rutgers. Now, Rutgers for a long time has been kind of the laughingstock of the Big Ten. They've been really, really bad. But they hired Greg Schiano last year. Recruiting classes are getting better. And overall, I have a really good feeling about the direction that this Rutgers football program is going. They showed immense improvement last season, winning 3 games in the Big Ten, which was not expected of them at all. They were expected to go 0-9 or however many games they had, and lose them all and do really, really bad. But they were not bad at all. They were actually really, really good. And they impressed me a ton last season. And I think that they're going to improve even more this year. They are not ranked in my preseason top 25. I don't think they're going to improve that much. But like I said, the recruiting classes are getting better. For the key players, I've got Bo Melton, the wide receiver, an excellent wide receiver. Was very solid last year, and he's going to continue to get better after his best season of his career last year. And then you've also got Olakunle Fatukasi at the linebacker. I like this Rutgers defense. They also got Christian Izzy in there at the strong safety. I think this defense is really solid. I like both those guys. I like this Rutgers team. Do I like them enough to give them to a bowl game, though? Let's see. No, I do not. I'm going 5-7, just falling short of a bowl game. But I think that most Rutgers fans will still be happy with this record. It's going to show that this Rutgers football program is going in the right direction, and potentially next year they could finally make it to a bowl game. Moving on to the Illinois Fighting Illini. Not good last season. They finished 2-6. Didn't have a good recruiting class. They're bringing back 70% of their team, which is okay. Key players, Brandon Peters, the quarterback, he has to be good if this Illinois team wants to be good this season, which they have not been in the past. Peters needs to step up in a big way this year. You've also got running back Chase Brown. I do think he's a good running back. I think he's the best player this team has offensively. But I still think if Illinois want to be better this season, he does need to improve at least a little bit. And I do think there is a chance that he improves because I think he's a solid player. But I don't know how good he's going to be this season. And then linebacker Jake Hansen. I like Hansen quite a bit. He's a senior this season, and I think he He was good last year. I expect good things again from him this season. The key games you see, 2 conference games against Nebraska and Rutgers, 2 games that I think they have to win, 2 winnable games in conference. And then you've also got at Virginia out of conference, which could be a tough game because I do like Virginia this season. I do not have a good feeling about Illinois this season. My record prediction is going to be 3-9, only 1 win in conference. I just do not have a good feeling. I do think that 1 win in conference will be the upcoming game on Saturday against Nebraska in week 0. I think they'll win that one, and they'll have some momentum behind them, and then they'll just lose all the other conference games for the season. I just don't like this Illinois team this year. I have nothing against them. I just don't think they're talented enough to be good in a conference like the Big Ten. Moving on to Iowa. Iowa is a team that usually I don't really like a lot heading into the season. But this year, I have a really good feeling about Iowa. They went 6-2 last season. They're ranked number 18 in my preseason top 25. I wanted to rank them higher, but I didn't think they could be too much higher. They had a solid recruiting class. They're bringing 72% of their team back. For the key players, Spencer Petras is the first one, the quarterback. He's been solid, but he needs to improve this season, I think. I don't think he's been bad, but if this Iowa State team wants to be consistently in the top 25, I think we need to see improvement from him. The best player on this team, in my opinion, is going to be running back Tyler Goodson, arguably the best running back in the Big Ten. Not in my opinion, but I think he's up there. He's been solid for the past couple years. I expect his best season yet. And then you've also got free safety Jack Kerner. Probably the best defensive player this team has. He was really good last season, and I think he can be really good this season as well. For the key games, you've got some very interesting games there. First, you've got Indiana in conference. Then a week later, you've got the game against the rivals out of conference, Iowa State on the road. That is going to be a huge game this season because Iowa State, in my opinion, a top 10 team in the nation. It's going to be a very important game for both teams. And then you've also got the road game against Wisconsin, which, in my opinion, could potentially decide which team from this division goes to the conference championship. My record prediction for Iowa is going to be 9-3. Like I said, I do have a good feeling about this team. It's not the easiest schedule, though. I see them losing a few. I see them losing to Iowa State out of conference. I do think they lose to Wisconsin in conference as well. Moving on now to Minnesota. 2 years ago, they surprised everyone. They were great. There were high hopes heading into last season, and they were really disappointing. Ended 3-4. They weren't bad. They were just disappointing, and they were not great throughout the season. But I do think Minnesota will improve this season. The recruiting class was ranked 38th in the nation, and their returning production rank number 35 in the nation. The key players there, they're all going to be offense because I do like this Minnesota offense. Tanner Morgan, great 2 years ago, and he kind of started to emerge as a potential top quarterback prospect for the 2021 NFL Draft. Then he had a very bad year, a very poor year, a very disappointing year, and decided to come back to Minnesota to kind of get his draft stock back high up again after it dropped so much last season. And I do think he'll get better this season. I expect improvement from Tanner Morgan, but he's going to need to play on the level he was 2 years ago, and even better than that if he wants to see himself considered as one of the best quarterbacks in college football. But one player that Minnesota does have that could consider him one of the best at his position in college football is going to be Mohamed Ibrahim, the running back. In my opinion, the best running back in the Big Ten. Probably one of the best running backs in the country. Top 10 in my opinion, maybe top 5. Minnesota's going to rely on the run game a lot this season. Ibrahim broke out last season. He had been solid in the past, but last year was really his breakout campaign, and I expect another good campaign from him this season. And then you've also got Chris Outman-Bell, going to be the number 1 receiver this year. Was solid last year, and I think he needs to improve this season to help this Minnesota offense out. Key games at Iowa, at Indiana, and against Wisconsin. My record prediction for Minnesota is going to be 7-5. Nothing crazy, but good enough to win a bowl game. I don't think they're going to return to be as good as they were 2 years ago, but I definitely could see them returning to a bowl game this season. Next up is going to be the Nebraska Cornhuskers, and this is another team that I do not have a very good feeling about at all. Last season, they were 3-5 overall. They did have a very good recruiting class, which is going to help them out a lot. But if you look over at the key player section, and the first guy there, it's going to be quarterback Adrian Martinez. He needs to step up in a huge way this season. Otherwise, Nebraska is going to be how they have been for the past few years, towards the bottom of the Big Ten. Martinez is a great runner. He's a very, very good runner, but he severely struggles as a passer. And he needs to show improvement as a passer this season if Nebraska want to make it to a bowl game. And I'm not really sure if he's going to show that improvement this season. I don't think he's shown any reason that he's going to improve. The defense I do like, though. Cam Taylor-Britt, excellent cornerback. Probably this team's best player in my opinion, and then you've also got JoJo Doman, the linebacker. My record prediction for Nebraska this season, I don't like this team that much. It's going to be 4-8, 2-7 in conference. I cannot see them making a bowl game with Adrian Martinez at quarterback unless he makes some sort of big improvement this season, which I just don't see happening, unfortunately. Moving on to Northwestern. Now, Northwestern actually won their division last season, and they surprised everybody. But it's going to be different this year. As you're going to see in returning production rank, only 34% of their team is coming back, which is awful. And that is actually second worst in the country. That's not good at all. Recruiting class is okay. Key players that are returning, one of them is going to be running back Cam Porter. I believe he was a freshman last season. He was solid. He needs to show significant improvement because this Northwestern offense wasn't great last season. And now that almost their entire offense is gone, a ton of the best players there are gone, he's going to need to step up in a big way. Defensively, that is what Northwestern was really good at last season. They're losing a ton of talent there, but some guys that they are bringing back, linebacker Chris Burgeon and safety Brandon Joseph. Brandon Joseph is the main guy here. I believe he had 6 interceptions last year. That might be wrong, but he did have quite a few interceptions last season. I believe he led the team in interceptions. So Brandon Joseph, a name to look out for. Overall, this Northwestern team, they're losing a lot, but I do still think they'll be solid. I'm going to have them going 7-5 this season, which will be good enough to get them back to a bowl game. Next up, Purdue. Purdue was a team that I really liked last season, and I thought they were going to be very, very good. They disappointed me. They finished 2-4. I believe they started off the season pretty well, but then they didn't finish it off that well. Not a great recruiting class. They're bringing back 78% of their team, which is good. Key players, Jack Plummer, assuming he does start at the quarterback position, which is not completely decided yet. But assuming he does start at that position, I think he needs to step up a little bit this season. And the main thing he has to do is get the ball to wide receiver David Bell. Best offensive player this team has, David Bell. He's going to be the number 1 receiver this season. Rondale Moore kind of been on and off the field for about a few years now. David Bell has to embrace this wide receiver number 1 role, which he has, and I think he's an excellent wide receiver. And I want to see maybe a little bit more from him this season, but definitely one of the best wide receivers in the conference. And then defensively, you also got George Karlaftis, the defensive end. A guy I like quite a bit. If you watch my way too early 2022 NFL mock draft video, I had him going in the first round. So I do like him quite a bit, and I think he's going to be a very good player on this Purdue defensive line. Key games, Illinois, Minnesota, and Indiana. My record prediction for Purdue, it's going to be 4-8, and I want to see this team make a bowl game this season, but I just don't think they will. I don't think there's enough talent on this team. Those 3 key players I listed, I think they're all solid, but I don't think overall this Purdue team has enough talent to make a bowl game, which is a little bit sad. But moving on finally to the Wisconsin Badgers. Wisconsin last season, disappointing. They went 4-3, but they had a ton of COVID issues in the program. Assuming they don't have all those issues again this season, I think we're going to see a completely different Wisconsin team. Wisconsin is ranked number 11 in my preseason top 25, which is second best among Big Ten teams, right behind Ohio State. They're 14th in the nation in returning production. Graham Mertz, the first key player there, will be back at quarterback. He was not great last season in his first year as a starter, but I do expect significant improvement from him this season. Running back Jalen Berger is very solid there. This team does not have the best receiving group overall, but it's a good O-line. And like I said, Jalen Berger is going to have a lot of success in the run game, in my opinion. And then the defense is solid as always, and the best player there is going to be linebacker Jack Sanborn. Key games, Penn State, Notre Dame, and at Minnesota. But my record prediction for Wisconsin this season is going to be 11-1 with a 9-0 record in conference. That only loss is going to come to Notre Dame on September 25th. I really like this Wisconsin team. I could see them maybe losing that game to Minnesota. Maybe they'll lose to Penn State or Iowa. But I do like this Wisconsin team a lot this season. I think 11-1 or 10-2 is probably the right record prediction. And I think definitely they should be expected to win their division this season. Whether or not they do that, we will have to wait and see. But I do think they should be expected to win the division. And I do think they will win the division. Moving on to my divisional standings. In the East Division, Ohio State topping that, obviously, with a 12-0 record. Then you've got Indiana and Penn State right behind them. Then you've got Michigan at 7-5, Maryland at 5-7, but they have the advantage over Rutgers because of their conference record. Rutgers right behind them, also at 5-7, and then Michigan in last, 4-8 with a 2-7 record in conference play. On to the West Division now, where Wisconsin finishes top, like I said, 11-1 overall. And that should say 9-0 in conference. That's a mistake there. Iowa, second. They finished 9-3 with a 7-2 record in conference. Then Minnesota and Northwestern right behind them, both a 7-5 record, but Minnesota with the advantage in the conference schedule. And then Nebraska at number 5. Purdue at number 6. Both of them have the same record, 4-8 with a 2-7 conference record. And then Illinois down at the bottom with a 3-9 record and a 1-8 record in conference. And moving on now to the Big Ten Championship, which is going to be Ohio State versus Wisconsin. My prediction for this game, I'm going to say Ohio State over Wisconsin. I think Ohio State has the better offense overall. They've definitely got the better receiving group, and I think the running games are similar, but overall, I think Ohio State has the better quarterback, the better receiving game. And then defensively, both these teams are good, but I think Iowa State has a little bit of an edge. I think this could be a decently high-scoring game, but I definitely think Ohio State should win it. That is my Big Ten predictions for the upcoming Big Ten college football season. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. Comment your Big Ten predictions down in the comment section below. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.